We
All
live.
right, here we go.
What's good, YouTube? It's your boy DWAN. Today is our first episode of Conversation in Coding. And I felt like it's a good idea to bring someone in that's been doing some major things in the community. John Capobianco, if you have not heard of him, he's, I would say, trend setting in the industry right now in the realm of network automation. When you talk about network programmability, you know, a lot of us are getting introduced to it. It's kind of new to a lot of us. And a bunch of people have been doing it for years. A bunch of network engineers have been doing it for years. But on the scale that John has done it and that I've have heard him talk about, he's an author of a book. He has his own open source network automation project. He's active in the community. He's doing a lot of great things to help other engineers get up to speed with network automation. He's very passionate about it. And so today, first episode of Conversation in Coding, we have John Capobianco. What's up, man?
Hey, man, Duan, this is a real pleasure for me. I really feel honored and blessed, and just the opportunity to be on this platform that you're providing, and to be part of this community. And I had asked you before we started when, I had a guess to 2017, 2018 that this whole movement of Lab Every Day started, and I can remember it, and I've been following it. So this is a big deal for me to meet you, and I appreciate you putting over my work, but it's a community of us. You're doing some amazing things. The Python Lab Challenge every day I've been following. There's an opportunity for us to share with people, right?
Right, right. And that's what it's all about, man. Um, you're very humble, and I appreciate that, man. But you got to brag about the things you're doing right now. Like,
Well, I've been doing some pretty neat things, and I appreciate it, and I think that what I'm able to do is, and I wrote this quote down. It's on my whiteboard. I got a whiteboard for tonight. We'll come back to it, but I wrote a quote here before we start. Right, comparison is the thief of joy. You said that not too long ago in one of your more recent videos, and it stuck with me that particularly for tonight, if you're watching this and you're going to see some really far out there things, they really are. Don't say I'm never going to do that. How did he figure this out? I'm not a genius. I happen to work hard. I put in the time. I'm passionate about it. I want to share with you, but don't, you can compare to where I was 5 years ago. Sure. 5 years ago, I was just getting started with this. And it's like, you hear it's 10,000 hours to become great at something,
yes,
right? They've done some study, and like if you played 10,000 hours of guitar or piano or whatever skill it is, and these are skills we're going to look at tonight. You'll get there. I'm just happen to be that, I'm on the other side of this curve now, and I'm able to look back, and um, I think the secret is because of the experience, it lets you start to become a little more free thinking with solutions. I'm
right,
not worried about syntax anymore. I'm not worried about how these things fit together. I sort of have a natural rhythm on how to work with these tools, and which opens up your mind to start thinking about the what if, what is possible, because you're not bogged down in what is the syntax, how do I write a
right.
for loop, right? So thank you.
Yeah, I think that's the major part. One of the reasons I started doing the Python daily quizzes is just to introduce people to the ease of use of Python. A lot of the quizzes that I put out there for you and I and others that do Python, it's easy. But for someone else, it's like, wait a minute, what is this? You know what I mean? So I make a quick 5 minute video kind of recapping, the quiz and just introducing like, hey, it's not that hard. Here's how it works. And let's just kind of talk about it. And once we get through a few videos, do this for a couple weeks. Now let's dive into functions and putting things together and looking at some APIs and seeing how we can actually apply this to our job. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, and I think fear, like in anything else in our lives, right? Fear is it's a real enemy.
Yes.
And it was for me. If you watch any of my earlier stuff and you mention my book, I was like, and I don't want to, I'm not saying anything bad about the tool, but I was all in on Ansible, and I thought that was the only thing I would ever need for the rest of my career. Like I was sold on this thing.
Right.
And part of it was my fear of learning a programming language, right? Ansible has the training wheels. It's pretty easy to write a little YAML playbook and get going. And for people who maybe haven't done that, just write an iOS fax module playbook. It's like 6 lines of YAML. It's nothing. It's very easy. But I thought it can't get any easier. And then I started using Python, and I was like, okay, not only is it easier because I have more control, it's more powerful, it's faster, in my opinion, for me, and where my tool. That's why I tried to. You mentioned Merlin and the open source project. It really was converting about 3 years worth of Python of Ansible solutions and ideas and approaches, and turning it into Python with the pieats library and framework.
Right.
That was kind of the original genesis of the project. But even like if I make it even more like boil it down, back in my days in the private sector, we had just bought, I think it was 6500s, a pair of them,
Oh yeah.
and finance was like, can you get us a spreadsheet of the inventory of this new, whatever that cost the company at the time? They wanted an inventory of all the parts in a nice spreadsheet for finance, right?
Man.
So, me, I don't want to say I was a junior at the time, but I didn't think of it at the time. I brought them the show version output in like 4 or 5 printouts, right? And I remember the look on their face. They looked at it and they looked up at me and said, like, I can't, what am I supposed to do with this, right? So that's always stuck in my head that these companies can make this equipment that can forward packets out to the internet, but I can't get a CSV file from the thing, right?
Man.
So that's what I was trying to piece together, is really something that simple. Now, it's evolved and grown, and it's led me to this and that and all these other things, Elasticsearch and Docker and Kubernetes, and we're going to see all this tonight. But don't forget, like in the back of your mind, it started with, can I get a spreadsheet or a CSV file from the show version command? That was like the seed that I planted, and now, maybe a year, 8 months later, I have a library of commands and all kinds of great stuff going on. So don't, if you get started, and I made this mistake early with automation in particular, I thought it had to be complicated or complex or solve some big problem
Right.
to be of value. And it's almost the opposite. The value is in automating those tedious, easy, repeatable things and just getting them out of your way. And some robot, like, I call them robots, some function, some Docker container, some service or solution you come up with, it just takes care of those repeatable, tedious if you do something more than 3 times a day, honestly, like maybe take a step back and say, could I not just write some piece of code that will do this for me?
Right.
And I can move on with something of higher value to the business and to my career and my own skill set, right?
Right.
That's the way I look at it anyway. Or once a week, or that big inventory thing you do once a year because it's Q4 and you have to account for all your budget. You go to every device and type show version and show inventory. Is that something you do like once a year? Great opportunity to write your own bit of Python, an Ansible playbook, whatever type of automation you want, right?
I want to talk about this. I don't want to leave this point because there's a couple things I want to ask you, but I want to say,
Yeah.
what's up to everybody that's tuning in. Thanks, Gabe, for the super chat. He's saying hello, great stuff. Which, John, he's the man. Everybody, you know how I like to do. Put your area codes in the chat. Let me know where you're representing, where you're from, so I can do some shout outs. I'll get back to those in a minute. But I want to ask John a question. So I've started with Python. I didn't start with Ansible, right? And what I've found is that it's harder for me to do Ansible than it is to do Python because I can just do whatever I want to do and have way more freedom with Python, and I feel bound by Ansible. But I do like the checks that's built into Ansible. I think writing those checks into Python takes a lot more work, and it's already built into Ansible. What's your thoughts on that?
I completely agree, and I think Ansible still has its place, and it's a big place, and it's a valuable place. I like things like a compute kind of thing, like let's say a Windows environment. Well, there's the setup module in Ansible that'll give me the full state of a Windows host, the bare metal, the RAM, the drives, everything you can think of about that piece of metal back as JavaScript object notation. And so I'm working very easily with network libraries with Python, but that would mean writing something in WinRM or some Pythonic way to do a PowerShell
Right.
call, or do you know what I mean? Like that's pretty complex stuff what they're
Right.
doing there.
Yeah.
It's like 4 lines of YAML to do that and get the state of a piece
Right.
of compute.
Right.
So I think they have a valuable place. For me, where it started to fall apart, Duan, was at scale and complexity.
Mm.
Those two things really hurt me.
Right.
In a small lab environment, I would write this great solution, and then I would try to bring it to, say, prod of like 1,200 devices or something.
Right.
And it's like, this thing's going to take 18 hours to run. I got to sit here and babysit it. I don't want to run like a COBOL batch job.
Right.
That's not the kind of operations I want. I need it to be now,
Yeah.
right? So as soon as I switched to, and I tried NetMiko, and there's a few others, I'm going to miss them, but
Yeah.
I landed on pieats, and that's sort of where Merlin, the name, came from, the magic, because I ran these things, and I had to look again at the screen and say, is it that all worked and it's done? Are you serious? Like, it's seconds at scale on
Right.
multiple devices. Now, there's some stuff under the hood I don't want to get into, but it's just the way connections are handled with SSH. It's the way sessions are opened and closed between the two tools.
Right.
You mentioned control. So I think Ansible's great for like training wheels, or like a nice guided, like you said, there's boundaries that you can't step out of.
Right.
Um, but I think as soon as you need to write, let's say, a dynamic for loop, a for loop that references an outer for loop, that's very challenging. That's 2 YAML files in Ansible to do that.
Right.
In Python, you can easily reference an outer loop from an inner loop without any special handling, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I don't want to lose anybody there, but Duan knows what I mean by this level of granularity that developers need, right? So that's how I feel about it. But I think the people at Red Hat are great. It's a great community. The documentation is incredible for Ansible, and you can be up and running. And that's why I wrote the book. You can be up and running in just a few lines of YAML.
Yeah.
Um,
I
Go
think
ahead.
it's
Go
I
ahead.
think it's important right here to mention that, Python is a tool and Ansible is a tool. We're all going to have our own tools, and I like to tell people when they ask me Python or Ansible, I think you start with whichever tool you feel comfortable with and use it until it doesn't work for you anymore. That's just my thoughts.
Right. I feel the same way. The only other comment I would make, though, is that if someone was to come to me and ask which they should start with if they were entering this field, my opinion has changed a little bit. I think you should recommend, or I would recommend Python, particularly for like resume and job hunting, and the skill set
I agree
is
with that.
broader.
I agree
You
with
have to
that.
remember they call it a domain specific language. So you're sort of putting it into a bit of a silo and a slice
Yeah.
of the industry that uses Ansible. Whereas Python is it's a programming language, big capital L, where you can apply it to anything across the board. It's not just that Terraform or Ansible or Salt or Puppet. You're not pigeonholing yourself into this domain specific thing, right?
Yeah. You know what? A weird thing is about a couple, like 2 years ago, I interviewed for this job. And while I was in the interview, I'm telling them everything I've done with Python, everything I know about Python. I'm laying it on thick. You know what I mean? Classes,
Mhm.
modules, inheritance, decorators, everything that I've written in Python. I'm laying it on. And so they're asking me about Ansible. I'm like, well, I don't really have experience with Ansible. And they kind of were like, they wanted me because all of their configuration management was written in Ansible, so they needed
Right.
someone to come in and do Ansible. So you kind of
Right.
need to have both under your tool belt to be able to say, okay, I can pick it up because I could pick up
Right.
Ansible. I just prefer
Right.
to use Python because it's
Well, it's
cool.
funny that, geez, you just described the opposite of what I said is going to happen in the real world. So thank you for telling that story. I never would have expected that someone would want Ansible over the Python. But
Right.
like I said, if they put all their chips, if they've spent a lot of money on Tower and they've got the full automation
Yep.
ecosystem by Red Hat, maybe that's their specific language of choice. Um, and I'm not going to judge anyone one way or the other. I'm not trying to gatekeep and say that Ansible's not real automation. It is. To me, it is. It's just, I think you can do a little bit more with Python. And I don't want anyone to be fearful of learning Python, right? Like,
Right.
uh, I had a bit of a different attitude of not even that long ago, 8 months, a year ago. But the power of Python and the solutions that I'm going to show tonight have really changed my opinion and my outlook.
Yes. Yes. All right. I'm gonna get to the chat. I'm gonna do some shout outs. Hey,
Yeah, let's hear what's happening out there. Who's all in the chat?
awesome. Uprising 4T, thank you for the super chat. He says, I'm overly excited about the topic of network automation and look forward to many, many more to follow. Awesome. Speaking of follow, John's contact information is in the description of this video, his bio, all of his links, his repository for Merlin, as well as his book. I recommend this book. It's awesome. We're going to help you get started. I think in the book you covered a lot of Ansible, though.
It's an Ansible book. It's
Yeah.
funny that I say this now, but yeah. So it's funny. The history of the book is I started writing it in 2018,
Okay.
and it came out in March 2019. And I looked into the history of it, studying for my DevNet Associate, which came out in 2020,
Right.
March 2020. So I was like, I beat Cisco to the punch here. I got my book out a year before DevNet was a real certification thing. And you know what? There's so much overlap. I'm going to plug my book a little bit here, but Git is in there, CI/CD is in there,
Yeah.
Ansible's in there. It was really like, this is pretty cool stuff, that the overlap between my vision of this, where we're going to go, automate your network, right?
Right.
And but things evolve and change over time. 5 years ago or 3 years ago in our field in IT, you might as well say it's 100 years ago, right?
It's moving so fast. I think you mentioned the exponential growth, that compound interest that we're getting in IT, not just in, the workforce, but in the skills that people are obtaining. The people that are coming in IT now have way more skills than I started out with. You know what I mean? Like the stuff they're
Yeah.
learning in the CCNA now, because it's more rounded, I think they're a lot better off than when I started and I had to just focus on spanning tree, a couple routing protocols, but I didn't know logging, I didn't know network monitoring, I didn't know all these different things that you needed. I didn't know wireless, it's just different now.
Yeah, the field's really evolved, and I think that's a good thing. I really think it's a good thing, especially the network engineer. There are a lot of, like the old show where they get the plates spinning in the air
Yeah.
and how many plates you can get spinning. I really feel like that's sort of like our little routine in IT now. Okay, I need to know this REST API. Oh, I got a little bit of keep my Python play going over here. Oh, I
Right.
got the monitoring going back there. I got, a new Elastic stack I got to spin up. Oh, I got to connect to the cloud. It's such a rapid pace, and there's no um I mean, the secret, and it's not even a secret, is lifelong learning. It's
Yep.
lab every day. It's what you talk about all the time. It's what I try to repeat and echo, that um, you have to try to. We talked about a tidal wave coming, and in tonight's topic's automation, and that's not just our field, right? Like, you talk about truck drivers are worried that automation is going to displace their industry
Right.
with self-driving transportation.
Right.
Like we're selfish and we think about us and our field and networking, but automation's big, and
Yeah.
humankind is crossing this threshold into robotics and AI and machine learning, and all of these amazing scientific fields are evolving, and automation is just this big net, like tidal wave coming at us. And like we said, right, you can either try to outrun it for safety, maybe retirement. Maybe I get to 65 before this automation thing gets to me here. Or you hop on a surfboard and you go out there and you try to ride that wave, right?
Yeah.
And harness the power of this change, this tectonic force, right?
That's the truth. That's the truth. All right, I'm gonna do some shout outs. Hey John, if you can get ready to share your screen so we can talk about Merlin and stuff.
All right, let's do it.
All right, and I'm gonna do some shout outs. Shout out to Reed J. Davis in New York. The 706. There's 225, 601, 202, 301, 703, 240. That's the DMV in the building. Bahamas in the building. Maryland, 869. Cali, 239, 805, 919, 347. West Africa in the building. Thanks, Johnny
Wow.
Vegas, for the super chat. If you got a question, please put it in the chat so I can check it out. 662 in the building. Reese, I see you. If you all have questions, put them in the chat. Could you share this out on your social media? John is about to get into this code. We're about to dive in and talk about network automation. This is about to be some real good stuff here. I'm excited. All
All
right.
right, so I got the screen sharing going. I'm not going to overwhelm anybody. There's a lot of files and a lot going on, but I'm going to take a deep breath and let's go slow. Now, the key to pieats is it's a testing, right? Python automatic testing solution. So what they use what is called a testbed file. Now, this is a little bit different than an Ansible playbook that uses a host file and variables. So this is my NXOS testbed. For the, where's my test bed here? For the DevNet sandbox, excuse me. So you have a list of devices and then the host name of the device and then different keys like the alias, the type. Now, this is important, the credentials to log in and the CLI connections. Now, you could have 5, 10, 100, 1,000, right? This scales this test bed. So then I'm going to jump into the Python code. And what we're doing here is you can see the loop here for device in testbed. All right, now this happens to be one device in the Cisco sandbox, but this could iterate over, like I said, 110, 1,000 devices. So now this is the magic is that we're using pieats. Let me get the whiteboard out too. Actually, I'm sharing my screen, but anyway, if you can still see me, I have it. I'll come back to the whiteboard once I'm done sharing the screen. PyATS can both learn functions, and you can see here in this section here, for the DevNet sandbox, I'm learning ACLs, ARP, BGP. I'm not going to go over all of them, but everything that I can learn. Now down here are actual show commands, and they look like show commands. Show VLAN, show VRF, show VRF all detail. So like little human robots, as if I had a fleet of people typing in show commands, and then what I get back is JavaScript object notation. Now, let me jump to say VLANs, or here, well, there's a small one. Here's BGP. So these are tests. So if it passed, if it's not none, then go ahead and Jinja template the JSON we get back into several file formats. And we'll look at the file formats. I don't want to spend too much time diving into the Python necessarily, but what this does, what each section does, is create 6 or 7 different documents. I call them business-ready documents and development documents and visualizations from the JSON that we get back from the above parsed commands. So let's run this live and let's time it. And let me show you that I'm not cheating here in any way. If I go to my output folder, I have a Cisco DevNet sandbox folder, and you can see here they're all empty. Now I'm not going to expand all of them. I'm going to expand as many as I can. And then, so what's going to happen is I'm going to run the Python code, and those folders are going to start to fill up with business-ready documents. So let me just take the pieats command. And for anyone who's not familiar with pieats, and I'm going to put in time so we can see how long this actually takes. Right, so it's a very simple one-line command. I'm in a virtual Python environment. I have pieats installed and a few other libraries. And I say pieats run, and then the name of the job file, job, DevNet Sandbox 9K Merlin. And then I feed it that testbed file. So if I had different topologies, for example, I could send it different testbed files. So let's run this, and my VPN is connected. And what you're going to see is some rich ASCII. And right now, it's learning the different functions. So you can see a bunch of access lists are on the screen. And here comes the routes and BGP, and it's going to take a couple seconds as it goes. And for anyone wondering how I color in that ASCII, how I made it nice and colorful, it's a Python library called Rich, and Rich lets you actually print color in your Python terminal. It's really fun. And Rich, he's very open. His name is Will on Twitter. He's very open about his development and his program, and it's an open source thing. You can make your, do you do anything with CLI output? See this chalice here? So Rich is kind of like HTML tags. So you wrap your ASCII or wrap your JSON or your logs in tags. So now it's done, and let's see how long this all took. So here's the power of pieats. You can see, DWAN, that each one of those is treated like a Boolean pass or fail test.
Yep.
So let's say this device didn't have OSPF. It would just fail, but then it would just move along and do the rest of the tests, right? So now this took, 1 minute to gather all of this command, and wait till you see the output. So now in VS Code, you can see the folders lighting up. And hey, out there in the chat world, does anyone have a favorite command? You're looking at VRFs. What do you want to see? Let's take a look at interfaces. So this is what learned interfaces looks like in JSON. Now, DWAN, I want to really hammer this point home. When we're talking about infrastructure as code, to me, it doesn't get any closer to infrastructure as code than the learned interfaces or learned routing as JSON. You can see here now in VS Code, I can collapse each of these interfaces if I'm interested in a certain interface. Now, the other thing is pieats doesn't limit this just to physical interfaces. If I scroll down here, here's the VLAN interfaces at the bottom, right? I have port channel interfaces. And it gives me right down to the input counters, the packet counters, the delay, everything you'd want to know about interfaces as JSON. Does anybody have any questions? Should I take a second? Do you want to mention anything about this?
Yeah, excuse me. I think this is extremely powerful. When we talk about being on the CLI, that's error prone, right? You can enter anything on a CLI, but when you have structured data, now you're bound. You can actually put safeguards in for how you enter data. Like you can focus just on the IP address of an interface, and so then you can put error handling or any kind of checks in there to ensure, okay, rather than just placing a string in that IP address section, you can actually say, okay, if it doesn't, you can use regular expressions to say, okay, verify it's an IP address. Okay, the IP address should be in this range of IP addresses. You can do all of this in Python. Like, and then you can take this data.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So here's something that I'm not sure if Merlin has this. You can take this data that's in a JSON. Oh, wow. That's crazy. You can take this JSON and put it like in a database, right? And so from there, you can build an API to request this data and, have some type of search. Hey, somebody get him out of the chat, please. Yeah, you can do some type of search to say, okay, at this site location, I think you said you had like 400 sites. At this site location, what's the route distinguishers at this site, this location? What's the verse? What's the VLANs at this location? All of this is in a database, from the structured data that you can put in Mongo or something. Like the power that you have right here is just amazing. Go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
No, man, you're all over it. So here, I have this little file here at the bottom here, and let me just call this up. You can see how I call it db.json. Well, this is and you can see how it has over 5,000 items. I can't even open all of it. Look at the sidebar, look at all the data. So what this is a tiny DB, it's called TinyDB version. So of all these commands you see up above, every one of those JSON files, I index them in this tiny database. Like you said, that I can search now with a full query language, or I could put an Android phone in front of it if I wanted, right? Now, the other thing is I want to point out about the JSON, what pieats is really built for, like its primary tool. I'm sort of, I don't know, I'm using it pretty creatively. But what Cisco has in mind is for you to do something like this. You see this input CRC errors? Well, Pythonically or JSON or however you want to look at it is interface dot counters dot input errors. Well, if this is greater than 0, Pythonically, send a flag, send an email, send an alert, put it as a failed interface or that I have an error. Every single one of these keys we can do things Pythonically with, and meaning we can test down to CRC errors on every one of our interfaces at scale, right? Pretty impressive stuff. Now, I also have this YAML file, which is a data dictionary. It's the same data, except it's in YAML, if people would prefer to consume it as YAML. The other thing I want to mention, Dwan, as the silos come down, and as the network engineers start working more closely with application developers, my application developers can consume and work with JSON very easily and make some pretty incredible things with it. But they might not know how to SSH into a router. And what are they going to do? Okay, we'll log into the router and run show this and turn it into J. I'm doing all that lifting for them. And now they don't need an RSA key fob. I'm protecting my management plane. I just give them a URL or a SharePoint library or wherever my Git repo, and they can start to consume this and build solutions on top of it. Now, let's look at the business ready. Now, this is really powerful stuff. And the other thing is, like, we can look at if someone wants to see a certain command. Let's look at, let's see if it routes. All right, let's do IP interface brief. That's a great command. So show IP interface brief, and there's the JSON, and they're all up and down in the IP. Now let's take that into CSV, and let me turn my preview on. Now this might not seem like much, and I don't want anyone to laugh or get, misunderstand how powerful this is. I can search, filter, find, sort. The CSV file transformed the world of finance in the 80s. I think the CSV file could transform IT because we can do real simple, powerful things. I want to see, is 172.16.1 dot, okay, there's 1.1. That's the only one I want. And it's up, 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 right? Or show me interfaces that if I select all, let me take this filter off and select all. Are there any, show me the interfaces that are down. Okay, so I know that all these VLANs are down. That's probably not good, right? The other thing is that it looks great for, like, I don't know, do I have anything in BGP sessions? Well, there's not a lot in there, but, I can sort by which local AS and how many peers do they have and what VRFs are up and what's the router ID. It's all of this. It's anything you'd want to know about the network, but in nice searchable, sortable CSV files. There's OSPF, right? And look at all the fields we have, right down to, right, there's one normal area in this OSPF neighbor, right? So I don't want to get too bogged down in this, but it's really, really powerful, these CSV files. And now the other thing is a markdown file. So those GitHub README files that you read, well, they're markdown, and we can render the same file from our Jinja 2 template. And then just to finish this off, and then I'll show you the template that makes these files, we can go ahead and make a full-blown HTML page. And let me show you what this looks like in a browser from that same data set. Now, how this is done is with, like I said, it's with a Jinja 2 template. So let me get the CSV file up here on one side, and then I'll open up the template that makes it on the other side, and I'll show you how simple this really is. It's really not that hard, and this is sort of, I'm giving away my secret sauce here. This is what Merlin really does, is take that pieats data, and where's your IP interface brief? show IP interface brief. Here we go. So the file on the left, this here, is what generates this CSV file on the right. So, and I'm actually making 3 different files here. I'm going to put some breakpoints in just so you can see it. So this top section, you can see they're all comma separated, makes the CSV file. And then this section makes the markdown file. You can see they're pipe separated. And then this file at the bottom, you can see that it's all HTML tags. But this is not very hard stuff, DWAN. It's simple if-else logic and for loops. So down here for the HTML, right? So I'm saying for each interface in the parsed interfaces, right? If the VLAN ID is defined, then go ahead and put in this table row. I'm not doing anything crazy here. It's just simple if-else logic, right?
Right.
Okay, so those are the 3 business-ready documents. Now let me show you something really neat that I think is really neat. And I want to say, I don't know, I can sort of see their place in the business, but they're not really business-ready just yet. Where is my mind map? So this markdown file, I'm going to give away my secret sauce here. It's all open source. This markdown file can be run through a tool called Markmap. Now, what Markmap does is make a mind map from any valid markdown file. Do you follow? So I can take that markdown and render it like this in this interactive mind map.
Nice.
Which I can click and collapse and zoom. And now I wanted to give a disclaimer. This is good for nice small data sets. Like this one only has, a handful of interfaces. The more data is, the bigger this tree is going to get. It gets a little hard to work with.
Yeah.
But for something like show inventory or show version or something, it's actually a really nice presentation layer to simplify, this technical document into a nice little leaf version.
Yeah.
Now the next file, I have to kickstart a server real quick. Let me just turn on my web server.
While you're there, John,
yeah.
Can you go back to that page for the DevNet sandboxes?
Oh, yes, for sure. That's why I have it open. Yeah.
All right. So for everyone that's watching this, once he goes back, the resources that he's using are free on DevNet. Now, for this particular lab, he had to reserve it. But once you reserve it, you have it for that set amount of time, whether you, and I think in this instance, you reserve CML, so Cisco Modeling Labs. And you can set up routers, switches, CSR, I think it's NXOS, all types of devices in this DevNet sandbox environment. And it has more than just CML. As you can see, you have ICE with Ansible, labs, everything. And this is free with labs and content to help you get up to speed with a lot of Cisco tools and devices. Go ahead, John.
No, it's incredible. That's why I had these tabs open. I wanted to show people. So, right, developer.cisco.com/site sandbox, and then there's getting started. You have to log in with, and there's like 8 different ways to log in: your Cisco CCO account, your GitHub account, a personal account, lots of ways in. You click Get Started with Sandbox. It'll take you to that landing page I showed you, and then you just search and look for. The other page I'll show you, has it rolled over yet, is the Cisco Code Exchange.
Yep, that's awesome.
So all of my code is on the Code Exchange. You can see here, Merlin is right here because I searched for pieats. But you can search for anything you want. If you search for Ansible, you'll find some of my Ansible solutions in the Code Exchange as well. So I can't believe this stuff. I really can't, because, I mean, when I was trying to get my certs, my early certs, you had to buy like the red exam prep book, and that was it. Like, good luck, right? Right. Now, like, because there was always that question. There's sort of that, like, but how do I get field experience? How do I get on a CLI if I don't work for a company? You know what I mean? Like they require so much experience in the field. How do I ever get that before I get a job? Well, you can do it now for free, for nothing, in the comfort of your own home. Plug away on the highest end equipment that Cisco has. Yep. For nothing, right? Like everything. And the other thing is I've built these Merlin solutions where, like I wrote them with you in mind, who's watching, where you can spin up your DevNet sandbox, get your VPN up, and then start running Merlin. That's all I'm doing. You can do what I'm doing here tonight at home. So
Yes.
yeah, that's why I have these up so that you can see them. And let me just get the web server up real quick. Now, what I'm going to show you next one is, oh, by the way, you probably know this, but anybody at home, did you see what I just did here? I just did a Python command and spun up a local web server. Like I don't need Apache or anything. I can just do it with Python 3. So now I'm actually hosting on port 8888. Pretty neat little Python tool there. So anyway, let me go to local host
And that's built in, right?
8888.
The HTTP server
And
is built in Python. That's a built-in
yes,
library, right?
yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So these are what's known as network graphs. Now let me show you one called IP route again. And this is pretty neat stuff. Now it's a little noisy, and you got to bear with me a little bit, but here is the sandbox, our device. And if I drag it to the side, you can see that it has two VRFs off of it, right? Default and management. Well, I can follow the path all the way out to their next hop or to their route. If I could find the next hop here, here's the next hop. So I know that this next hop has these different routes connected to it. Or where's the default route? 000. Here's 000. So this is how traffic gets out. Now, again, I'm not saying this is business ready or that you would put production on this, but you can represent a lot of neat things through these network graphs. So like, let's look at VRFs maybe, network graph, and you can see that this sandbox, it has those two VRFs off of it, management and VRF, and they're both up, and because they're both up, they share that common connection. So that's what we've seen so far is the CLI version of Merlin. Now, in the poll I did earlier, people wanted to see Docker as well. So let me just close my Ubuntu here, and everything else I'm going to show you, you can do at home with Docker Desktop. So let me get Docker Desktop open.
Right. Is that Doom?
Now,
Is that Doom on your desktop?
yeah, it's Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom mixes science and magic, right? So he's like perfect for my desktop, and I painted that, by the way.
Nice.
So, Juan, here's the challenge I face with the open source thing, and tell me if this sounds familiar. People have to know some Linux, they have to know some Python, they have to be able to make up virtual environment, they have to be able to do some pip installs, and then they have to actually be able to run the code. That's like five or six steps away from my app and a brand new user. Would you agree that Linux in general might be the biggest barrier, more than say Python or Ansible, to network engineers? That they just don't know enough Linux yet to run these tools?
Yeah, I think Linux is a huge barrier. Some people struggle with version control. Some people
Right.
really struggle with that. So I think version control and then Python virtual environments along with Linux, like those three right there, in my opinion, are like three of the biggest hurdles. Because once you learn Python, it took me a minute to get my head wrapped around virtual environments. Git was pretty easy for myself. And then Linux, as a network engineer, I was troubleshooting back-end servers all the time. And so I didn't really have a problem once I started using Linux. But
Right.
yeah, and then containers is a whole different monster, getting your head wrapped around that. So it's levels to it. Just get started with Python, start on Linux, code on Linux, get used to using Linux, and you'll be fine.
Okay, so everything you're going to see here next is it's pretty bleeding edge stuff, I think, and it touches on, like you mentioned, containers. So what I wanted to do is make it even easier for people to run Merlin, people that don't know how to make a virtual environment or do a pip install. What if I could package all that up in a container and make it where people can just run it in a one-line command or in a click? So let me show you the code here, because this is pretty exciting to me. And people, no, hang on, Docker. Not everybody has seen, a Docker file. And everybody who's been following me, I just passed that DevNet Associate. Well, you know, I got news for you. If you look at the if you look at the outline, Docker and containers is on that exam, right?
Yeah.
So what I have is what I've done. It's basically the same code. All the Python is the same and everything. But what I've done is I've broken them into little micro containers, microservices, where that show IP route or whatever is now its own container. So if I go to my Docker, and let's look at that IP interface brief, that's a good example. Interface brief. I have a Docker file now, and you can see it even has a little whale icon. So this is my um, image, my container instructions on how to build the IP interface brief container. Now you can see I do from and I say base image. Now if I show you base image, this is where I'm, installing. So I'm going from Ubuntu. So here's maybe some way people can think about Docker and containers. The word image is right in there. And now for me, I link that with an ISO, right? Image standard organization, an ISO, like a CD-ROM or a DVD. You maybe have mounted a virtual CD-ROM in VMware before, and it's an ISO. Or you maybe have taken an image of a CD and made it an ISO image. I think of containers as like, CD-ROMs without CDs, but it's immutable and it has runtime instructions and everything's packaged up together. So I'm installing Python, I'm installing pieats, I'm installing Apache, and I'm installing Elasticsearch, and I'm exposing a port. That's basically what I'm doing here. Now, I have a Docker compose file that makes these services, and I bring up these services on different interfaces. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring up my Docker homepage, and I'll show you what this looks like. So this is a Docker compose up, and then I say Docker underscore homepage, and this should bring up a container. Now, if I look in Docker here, well, now I have a container app running, which is my Docker homepage. So now if I open up my localhost 8080, I have this nice homepage that will take you to all of the microservices, as well as Elasticsearch and Elastic Cabana. We're going to come to those in a second. But let me just bring up one of the other containers real quick so we have some data. And I can take questions if anybody's like curious as to what's going on, or if I've lost anyone. So I am and I'm not. I would love to put one out. It's a lot of work. It's really hard. But maybe I haven't ruled it out. Between everybody, I enjoy writing the code a lot more than writing the book, if that makes sense. I like writing to my contributing to this project more, say, than a lot of back and forth writing the book. Um, but no, I appreciate the question, and maybe someday I would be interested in maybe writing a pieats book. I've really fallen in love with that tool. Maybe if Cisco Press wants to to publish a pieats book someday, I'd love to do that. So let's bring up interface brief. Now, what you can see is that's the image name. It depends on Elasticsearch, and there's the context, meaning that's where I point to that Docker file I showed you earlier. And these are the ports that I want to expose. So now let me bring up that container. Whoops, Docker container. Docker compose, excuse me. I said what I meant to type. Okay, so now if I go here, I have a new container running. And what's neat is we can actually watch. It should just kick in a second here. Maybe not. I thought we could watch it run. Oh, I see. It's starting Elasticsearch first, and then it will start. It's just waiting for the dependency. Here we go. So now inside of Docker, look, does this look familiar? It's like that CLI stuff, except inside of a Docker container. And it looks like maybe it had a problem. Let me restart it here. Failed to establish connection refused.
Is your VPN up?
Yeah, my VPN's up. This looks like it's a problem. I see what's happening. It's Elastic is not quite up yet, so it's refusing my Elastic connection.
Ah, okay.
There we go. Now it's working. So it all passed. So you can see I don't need to show people, right, pip install this, virtual environment that. They can just run the container. So now in the microservices, if I go to show IP interface brief, well, check it out.
It's popular.
I've even given it business logic to say if they're not up, make them red, and if they're up, make them green.
Yeah.
And then I have links to the raw JSON file, the raw YAML file, the CSV file, which is going to download, and I can open the file, the markdown file, and the Elasticsearch schema. So this is what it looks like in Elasticsearch. I'm sort of leading you into Elasticsearch. You were really excited about databases and searching. Just wait, I got some really neat stuff to show you here. And then the index in Elasticsearch. So this is all Elasticsearch data now that we're looking at in the container world. The other thing is I'll point out, Elastic is really easy. If you look here, I have an image here or a container called Elastic somewhere in here. And all I'm doing is calling the public Elastic right here, right? See, my image is actually from Docker Elasticsearch. So if you want to play with search, you just bring up their container they provide for you. That little CD-ROM I'm talking about in the cloud. Same as Kibana.
Yeah.
Now I'll bring up what else? Was that it? No, let me do something real quick. Now I want to show you the power of this, and I had that IP interface brief. Give me 1 second to get a putty in, and because people aren't connecting the automation here, let me show you the automation at work here. So I'm just going to log into the Cisco router in the cloud. Whoops, that's the wrong password. And let's give it a new interface and then restart the container. And that's all I have to do. So conf t int, I don't know, let's say loopback 100 IP address 10, 10, 10, 100, 255, 255. 2550, no shut. Okay, so now, right, someone's added a new image. All I need to do is restart this container, my IP interface brief container, which runs in seconds, right? And, okay, now it's going to run.
Now, one thing I'll mention, like in a production environment, these containers will be workers. So then from the designs that we've had in my previous role, this actual container or Python code would actually be a worker. And so the front end, right, you would never have to restart that container because you would set that worker to run, let's say, every 8 hours or something to update the database and all of that. So this is really powerful stuff. Yep.
It could be really, so there it is right there, right? You can see there's the new loopback. Now you mentioned the worker thing. Let me tear down a couple of these containers. And well, I don't think I need to necessarily do the Kubernetes. Let's look at the Elasticsearch stuff. And then maybe, I don't know. So DWAN mentioned the workers. How I've solved that for my home use is by using Kubernetes. So, and what led me to that was here in Docker. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to start. I clicked the wrong thing. Let me just show you the Kubernetes screen after I close Steam. So here in Docker, it might be hard to see. Let me minimize it. You see this Kubernetes wheel? It's an optional feature in Docker Desktop. You can turn on Kubernetes. Right. So then what I'm doing is using Kubernetes to a cron service, right, to restart my Kubernetes every 2 minutes or 8 minutes or 8 hours or whatever. But that's pretty neat. But let's look at Elastic, because I agree with you. That's the real powerful and exciting stuff. So if I go back here and show you the Elasticsearch, now you're going to say, is that it? And that is it. This is all you get with Elastic. There's no GUI, there's nothing. You just get this.
Well,
So there's a couple of add-ons that we can work with.
oh yeah, like
And
Cabana.
one,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah, Cabana and Elastic View, and I'll show you them. But okay, so I have the JSON from pieats, and I need to get it into Elasticsearch. Elastic has really strict rules and what's it called? Like input validation of the JSON you send it, meaning it has to be all lowercase. Let me use a simple example. Has to be lowercase data. Well, the pieats I get back, like VLAN, the capital V in VLAN is a problem. So I use Jinja to normalize it, meaning make it lowercase and do other things to it. But to set up Elastic, I'm going to show you a couple things. First, we have to make this pipeline if we want timestamps. So what I do is I do a put against that Elasticsearch and tell it, I want this pipeline. And in this pipeline, I'm just saying set the ingest time. And then as I have indexes, so I want an index for learn VRF or an index for IP brief. I tell that index to use the default pipeline. So then as I'm bringing data into Elastic, I get the timestamp data. Now, while I'm here, let me get IP interface brief in Postman. And this is what the data looks like.
Yeah, and
it really.
I was gonna say, for those of you that don't know what he means by put, that's just updating Elasticsearch. A get is just returning data, so you're just requesting like a Google search. A put is just updating his to the new fields, the new entries in the fields of Elasticsearch that he wanted to update.
And if I look here real close, I guess I could do a find. Where's my find?
It's the hourglass in the right-hand corner.
Ingest. Where's ingest? Here. So I have the ingest time. So this is the interface brief. Now, if I look at the search and I go to the search, this is where I have, they're called shards. Right? You can see that I have shards here. And there's my ingest time. So that's not me sending it. That actually gets stamped every time I feed the database JSON. As it's being ingested into Elasticsearch, it gets a timestamp. And I'll come back to why that's important. But this is actually a search. And I can do keyword searches against this data set. Now here's a specific index of data. And then here's a search for, let's look for, can you see this? Source equals interface star interface status.
The search.
Well, all I'm getting back now is just the status. I don't get the IP addresses or anything. So that's in the Elastic. Now, what's really neat, DWAN, is that I can do this. This Elastic stuff works right in a browser. So if I go there, it actually lets me, like I can do queries right in line in my browser, provided I know the Elasticsearch syntax, right?
Right.
That's pretty powerful on the fly.
Now,
but now let me show you. Yeah, go ahead.
The Elasticsearch, is that a time-based database? Is it considered a time-based database?
I'm not sure. It's I believe it's a NoSQL database and a document database. I'm not sure what you would consider it with time. Now, I just want to point out, I open this in my browser, and I'm just so you can see this. If you just Google Elastic View, I just want to go to the homepage here. Elastic View. So this is like, right, a free and open source Elasticsearch GUI for your browser. And you can see it's integrated right in my browser, and that's how I've opened it. And now that I have Elastic View, this is when it gets really fun. So here's my indices, and these are all of those different learned and parsed functions as database shards. And you can see how big each one of them is, how many documents I have in each one of them. But then I can actually do searches, Dwan, like you said. So let's search for here, 0, 0, 0, 0, a real popular thing in networking, right? Well, that shows up in Learn BGP here as a cluster ID, right? It also shows up in OSPF as an area ID. You know, and and we can adjust that to be, how about this? Find every 172.16 address in the database. So I can do a wildcard search here. And now look, learn routing has showed up because there's 172.16.10 or 11. So it really turns it into Google for the network, or network as search, however you want to look at it or talk about it. But we can do all kinds of just cool queries. Now, I'm not sure if it goes as far as if I just put up, but like if I put a BGP ID in 65535, well, it shows up in BGP sessions, it shows up in BGP processes. No CLI. You don't even need to know the commands. Like, what are you looking for? Well, what about a MAC address, right? I don't know. Do I have a MAC address in my searches? Maybe not. Anyway, you know, what device is this MAC on, or what's in the ARC table, or it's just keyword searching, right?
So, excuse me. So, in my last role, we had like a front end. Let's just call it a front end that had all of this set up in the back end. So you could go to that front end and just type in the VERF. So if you type in the VERF, it'll show you all the IP addresses for that VERF. It will show you all the route distinguishers for that VERF. It will show you pretty much everything you wanted to know about that VERF, the locations, all of that. And so when you talk about network engineering, a lot of this data, you know, we have to hop into the devices and try to get or hunt down. But if you have this centralized, it makes a network engineer's job 100% easier. What's your thoughts, John?
Oh, I completely agree. And centralized, like with like something like Git or SharePoint, or like there's so many ways we can collaborate now and make it easier. And um, it really is like I like to say, democratize the data state, because I could give this to management, to frontline operators, to the NOC, to analysts, to engineers and architects, to security. There's many consumers of this now that we've moved it out of, like I said, that story about me printing off the show inventory command
Yep.
and trying to get finance to consume it. Well, now we can make search engines out of this stuff. It's just incredible, right? So I think Cabana might be up now. Let me show you this. All right, great. Oh yeah, I gotta have a login. Just give me one sec. I gotta get this password. So Cabana is part of the actual stack. Um,
Elk stack. Is that what it
yeah,
is?
the Elk stack or the Elastic stack,
Yeah.
and it's the visualization tool. It's much more than that. You'll see here in a second. So it comes with Enterprise Search, its own search tool.
Yeah.
Cabana itself, there's machine learning, there's observability, but let's look at Cabana and dashboards. So I have one for the Nexus 9000. I just have to adjust the time scale real quick. So let me change this. Start date, absolute. And let's go back to, I don't know, July, because this might be a while ago. Okay, here we go. So on this date, right, what this is the input unicast rate. And if I hover over it, right, on 2021-07-17 at noon, it was, 582,000. A couple days later, it dropped. And then we can also plot it in different types of charts like this. We have different input-output rates like this. And this is a very simple example. There's no CRC errors if we just want a simple label and a JSON value. But if we go into like the actual dashboard designer, create a dashboard visualization, we can pick from, so I have learned interface as my source here. And again, I'd have to change this time again. Absolute to whatever the first updated. But what we can do is we can change like everything you can think of, horizontal and vertical bar graphs, line and area charts, donut and pie graphs, anything you want. And it's just as simple as dragging and dropping your fields. Now, remember I talked about ingesting in the timestamp and why it's important? Why it's important is because I can use it as the timestamp here, the ingest time, which lets me plot things over time in Cabana. If I didn't have that timestamp at ingest time, I wouldn't be able to do like time series database plotting of information. The last tool I'm going to show you really quickly on the Elastic side of things is a tool called Kaizen. Now, have you ever played with like an SQL thick client, DWAN, and database work?
Early on, or I would say like 5, 6 years ago when I was doing system administration.
Okay. Well, this Kaizen tool takes those commands. Where's the interface brief?
The SQL query, query commands. Is that what you're
Yeah, and
talking
it,
about?
it it like visualizes it in this Kaizen, and there's each of those ingested timestamps. So I actually have all of the interface information in a nice searchable, queryable front end like this, and I can look at it per time. Now, if I do something like interface, see how I have it for each interface?
Right.
So it's very granular, and I have it. One of these is going to be the timestamp. I don't know which one, but one of these fields is going to be the timestamp. Well, I know through the whole history, possibly the whole life cycle of a device, from when we first turn it on to when we decommission it, we can know the state of it. There's like 50 different tables in here at any point in time. There's a security breach. There's some P1. There's some problem. There's some change. Well, who changed it and when and why?
Right.
What did it look like before the change? What did it look like after the change? It's all here in like you said, in a database, and this happens to be in the Elastic database.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I've used a lot of Mongo, and the way I guess in the first, what is that? It wasn't. What's the first example that you were using for the
Tiny,
front end?
tiny DB, yeah.
No, the Elastic View. Is that what it was
Oh,
called?
Elastic View. I'm sorry. Yes, yes,
Yes. So in Mongo you can do like aggregate searches. Can you do that in Elastic as well?
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just flushing out this loopback interface that I added before I move on to the next demo. How are we for time? Do we have a little bit more? Do you got a little bit more in you tonight?
Yeah, I'm good. I was just we still got viewers, and I want to let them get some questions in. So if you all have
Okay.
questions, leave them in the chat.
Yeah, now's a good time for a deep breath because I'm going to shift gears here and move into something that's more fun, but I think it's still valuable because there's Python and network automation involved.
Yes.
And let me go into my code repository here and make sure. I
Uh,
just want to make sure something's not commented out here real quick
cool. I
in
want to thank
interface
everybody
brief.
for viewing today. Shout out to Orwin. Orin's here. Orin Brigg.
Hey, all
Appreciate you.
right. Hey, Oren. I gotta say, one of my early pieats things was actually Oren's work on CRC errors, ping tests, half duplex tests. If you look at the pieats solution automation repository, a lot of that's Oren's work, and he really helped me early on in my transition from Ansible.
I need to get with him because the tool that I haven't picked up yet is PyATS, and I work for Cisco, and I'm embarrassed to say that, but I'm not in the field so much, so it's so many different tools I need to learn. But PyATS is my next big mountain I need to climb.
Well,
Cause
I can help you with that. I'd be happy to help you with that, Duan. It's a lot of fun. It really is. So okay, this is all set. Now remember we've used Jinja 2 to move network state data into various APIs and into different systems and presenting it differently. What I'm going to show you next is a tool called Blender. And Blender is a 3D animation studio. But what we can do is bring in our JSON and our Python into Blender. So let me start with interface brief. This is a fun one. I like this one. So what I have is, and I'll change the color and make this look pretty in a second, but I want to show you this in a grayscale first. This is the show IP interface brief command that we all know and love at the CLI. Well, what I've done is, and I'll show you what these spheres do in a second, but this is from the JSON data, and it is the VLAN 104, and that's its IP and its status. Well, what I've done here in this panel is use BPY, which stands for Blender Python. I bring in my JSON, so I load my JSON file into a variable. And then what I'm doing is if the certain JSON value is healthy or not healthy, I color in the materials in this 3D world with different materials, either up or down, which is like red or green. So let me turn on the color and I'll show you what this means.
It's like 55 lines of code. That's pretty cool.
So now, you see here? Now, I like to call these idiot lights. Is the interface up or down? Well, any idiot could tell you whether or not that interface is up or down, right? Based on the big solid red or green light, or even the NIC is different colors, right?
Right.
Now, let me zoom it around. Like this is full 3D. And then if I turn on the animation, so actually, just give me 1 second. I'm going to get my putty session back up, and I'm going to see if we can do this in real time.
All right.
So let me, yeah,
You might need some
putty
time to
real quick.
load too. I think it give you a graphic some time to load with the
Oh,
band
is it slow over the, yeah.
a little bit.
All right. Well, let me, here. So, um, I don't see any, there's a loopback 1 that is green, but that's the only loopback interface. So let me make that loopback 100 again. Conf T in loopback 100 IP address and then 100.255.255.255.0. No shut. Now I'm going to run. Let me get the code. I'm going to run. I already have VS Code open here. The IP interface brief job. And this is going to run real quick in the background. Whoops. No. I don't want to do that. I want to bring up the Docker container. Docker compose IP interface brief. I forgot for a second what I was doing. Docker compose up, and we're going to bring up, and then that'll just run in the background. But hopefully, now let me turn on the animation here.
Hey man, how long did it take you to develop Merlin? I know at one point it was named Magic Carpet. So how long did it take you to do that?
I think I started around October of last year.
Man,
I've been going pretty much nonstop since then.
you took full advantage of the lockdowns. That's
I
good
have.
stuff.
Yeah, I had a lot of time on my hands, man. And so there, look, boom. There's loopback 100. It wasn't here a second ago, and it's been dynamically fed in. Pretty neat. So yeah, and then look I got these logos spinning around and stuff. I'll let that settle in, and maybe the.
Yeah, we can.
All right, okay. So let me open a different one. I'm not going to save that. So, okay, here's a good one. And this is a plug for something you might not be aware of in the Cisco community. Cisco has a REST API called the Product Security Incident Response Team, or PCERT, it's known as.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
And it's incredible. So what you can do is now what I do is pieats has parsed certain commands, and I take the version of my platforms and programmatically send them up to the pcert, and I make those reports that we've talked about.
Hmm.
Well, what I've done here in this Python or in this Blender is made a vulnerability report, and I use nice scary skulls to get the point across. Now, here's the Python for this one, and this is a lot of Python, but what I've done is broken it down to say if the vulnerability is between certain values, meaning if it's greater than 9 or equal to 9, then it's a score of 5. And I have 5 different scores. And then the color changes and the lighting system changes depending on the severity of the vulnerability.
Right.
Right. So let me run the Python and let me turn on the coloring here. Now this one doesn't have any animations behind it, but you can see that
That
this one here is yellow. It's or red because it's critical.
you got to
And
get the
this one
flames
is
coming out the eyes or something.
yeah. I have little glowing eye sockets in there that are pretty neat. But you can see that it even casts the shadows and everything. Oh, I have. Let me turn the mesh off. There we go. And again, depending on the number of vulnerabilities, and it actually has the CVE information, the name of the vulnerability, the score of the vulnerability. Down here on the floor, it has the URL information and stuff. And again, I'm just doing this because it's fun, and I want maybe kids to get interested in networking and Blender and Python, and it was a good way for me to practice some Python. Now
Yeah.
let me show you the
I,
last one, which is the coolest one of them all.
okay. I got two things. Two things. So the first thing is from Sam Jones. He said, "Would you use this 3D tool as a dashboard to monitor your network?"
I wish I could. I think so. I think it would be fun. And the other thing is, I think imagine, okay, I got to go to the data center, and that means slipping on a VR headset
Yeah.
instead of physically going to a data center.
Yeah.
Or what if I could put on a VR headset and be hands and feet and walk a field engineer through something through augmented reality, right?
Yeah.
But I don't see why this couldn't be up in a NOC somewhere or up in on a screen somewhere, some fun way to display the information, right?
Have you heard of the metaverse?
Yeah, I have.
The-
I just heard about it, and I was like, I wish I had coined the term.
I
I've
know.
been saying, I've been saying like 3D network animations and stuff. I should have called it the metaverse.
Right.
And what was the second question? You said there was two
Yeah,
questions.
yeah. Orwin mentioned that you had an MVP of Merlin up and running in a couple days, and he's making that point to let everyone know that it does not take months to get code out there.
Oh yeah, I started that long ago, but he's right. I snowballed very fast. That show version command, the CSV to Markdown HTML, it was a lot of copy. I call it copy pasta. A lot of copy and paste of, okay, I got, 90% of this code is exactly the same,
Right,
except instead of show version, it's show inventory
right.
or show VLAN or show VRF. And I have to write the appropriate Jinja template. But no, he makes a great point. You can get up and running very fast with little friction. So, Dwan, I gotta ask you, man, in your mind, when you think of a network, when someone's describing the components of a network, or if you're looking at something like a CDP output, this is the output from a CDP. I'll zoom back in a second, but in my mind, I sort of have a mental picture of what a northbound device is, on a router on the way out to the internet or something, and that the internet cloud is
Right.
as far north in my network as you can go. And a data center device might be southbound or east and westbound. Do you kind of draw that mental picture in your mind?
I used to till I started working for an ISP, and then everything was just like east, west, north, south, just all in between. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, north, south. Yep.
All right. So what I thought I would do, and what you can see here is I have two NICs north, two NICs east and west, and then a handful of NICs south. Now, if I zoom back, what you're going to see is a topology, and this is very close to like a Visio diagram. I've got a couple routers up here. I've got some wireless access points down here. I have some switches over here. Now, this happens to be fully three-dimensional. So there's a couple 6500s up here, and it's GI 196 on this side of the wire. And I can swing this around and get more details, such as the duplex and the VLAN and, lots of different stuff. Now, this is my big finale. Let me show you something pretty neat. Now, in this Python, this is a real challenge for myself. And it really was like write it down on paper was an idea, and then try to figure out the Python. So what I wanted to do was make wires that connect all these NICs. So I figured out how to make a wire in Blender, and then a wire has two ends to it in Blender. Well, all I needed to do was get the XYZ of each end and set them to be the XYZ of the appropriate NICs. So let me run the Python. And there we go. It's now connected all of these wires to their appropriate up or downstream device. And it's all full 3D. So that really looks like a wiring map. So now let me turn on the view real quick. And I've also put it in a full 3D, full three-dimensional rendered world. And then check this out. All right, so everybody hear this. I'm going to leave you with this. Go out there and make it rain. Is that something the kids say, make it rain? Well, let me hit play, and I'm going to make it rain in the 3D world of Blender. So it might be hard to see, but do you see the animated rain falling from the
I
sky?
do. This is like, what's that Pokemon game that everybody's playing with their phones?
Oh, yeah, yeah. It is. It is. I know what you mean. So now it's raining in the 3D world of Blender here. All right, so let me come back and stop sharing my screen and come back to me and you.
Okay.
So, I mean, that was like a roller coaster ride through Merlin, and I had a lot of fun, and I hope it inspired some people out there. But what do you think, man? Like, is this where we're going? Is like we're leaving the CLI behind and we're ready to make search engines and front ends and consumable, data, right?
Yeah. I don't think we're leaving the CLI behind. I think once we're fully controller based, maybe. But even like with ACI and things like that, you if you really got to get in the weeds, you got to get in the CLI. So I think
Yeah.
the CLI will still be around for the higher level, more advanced stuff, but for your everyday work, your everyday operations, it's going to be centralized. It's going to be API driven. It's going to be controller based, and then we're going to be in the metaverse.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the CLI maybe is going to take a bit of a back seat unless you got to debug something. I mean, you're not going to go in and debug with an API.
Right.
It's going to be done with the CLI still, but I think there's going to be a shift as we start to move to either controller based or NX API, REST conf, Yang models. I think there's a big future in all of those types of operations. And I think that pieats it's going to breathe a little bit of life back into the CLI because it kind of turns it into an API where we can deal with structured data now and work like, a little bit up the stack as opposed to, raw standard output from a CLI, right?
But here's a question though. Here's a question like where right now we're in this automation phase to where we're still configuring device by device with automation. What happens when everything is controller based? Like how does that really flip networking? Like what does networking look like at that standpoint to where you can just plug in a router and it gets loaded with all this configurations. You plug in a switch, it gets loaded with all this configuration. Like what happens then? Like what are we doing?
Um,
Like what's the next thing?
right. Well, I'm really excited about that phase. I'm moving into that phase professionally with a new next generation iteration, and it's likely going to be controller based.
Right.
I think So let's take one of our old, our old standby favorite, Cisco Prime infrastructure.
Yep.
Now it's not controller based like SDN controller based, but what I think is neat about controller based is that we can. It's like you said about centralization. I can go to one place, one source of truth now, and get the configuration of all the downstream devices.
Yep.
Something like NSO, where I can go get the gang model that's been pushed out to all the devices downstream through a central API, right? I think that that's where most of our work is going to be done, is writing solutions that interface with the controller or with other APIs if we're not quite at the controller based solution, right?
Right.
And I think we have that flexibility that, I mean, I'm excited about ACI. I'm excited about DNA Center. I'm excited to learn more about OpenFlow,
Yeah.
just to
Right.
know a little bit more about it on the side.
Right.
And I'm really excited, man. I think it's such a great time to be alive in this industry, in this field. And I want to take the time to thank everyone who joined tonight and was excited about this. And we mentioned my book earlier. Duan, just give me a second on this.
Okay.
If anyone out there is COVID displaced from work, if anyone out there is a student, if you're a teenager, if you're in the developing world, if you want my book, get a hold of me. Honestly, get a hold of me. It's no questions asked. You'll get a PDF in the email. I'll get it to you as soon as I can. Don't feel bad about it. I'd rather you have the book and read it than not be able to afford it and not read it. Okay, it's not about the money. It's not about anything. It's about community. It's about sharing. And if you're in a part of the world that can't get my book, let me know. I'll try to get you a PDF of it. Okay.
Hey man, that's amazing of you, man. That's what's up. That's what's up. I got a question. Everybody's talking about the cloud now, right? What happens to the traditional data center? What are your
Yeah, I
thoughts?
so I love the cloud. I really do, and I've embraced it, and I have built some production grade solutions using things like Azure and Azure Express Route. And I like the idea of maybe I like hybrid cloud, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I like having swing space in the cloud for certain bumps in activity, or like, I don't know, in my business, something like the election that happens every 4 years, and I need like elastic capability to
Right.
handle a big burst of demand that's not going to be there in a month. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to build up on-prem permanent infrastructure for something that's ephemeral, like a big sale on your website,
Right.
right? Now, the on-prem, I don't know. I don't know how much longer organizations want to be in that business.
Mm.
I guess it depends on your security constraints is probably
Right.
still number one,
Yeah.
and maybe even availability. I know that I know that the cloud, one of the big things it sells is availability.
Right.
But if you've been through a cloud outage versus an on-prem outage, it's hard for me to answer executives and senior management who are looking for a fix and a solution. And all I can say is you got to go to the cloud provider's service portal and they'll tell you when it comes back.
Right.
That's all I can do for you. And they're pretty upset with me about this, right?
Right.
I'm sorry, it's not our stuff where I could give you a definitive look, we're going to roll back and it'll be up in 45 minutes. Or
Right.
look, there's a deeper problem, or we hit a bug, or we need to invoke a failover or a DR. You have that control, right?
Right.
It's kind of like our discussion about domain specific languages and programming languages, where the cloud is kind of that domain specific language. We're going to take care of almost all of your needs. You're going to have to know a couple little ways to interface with us.
Right.
We got you. We got you covered. Maybe that's good enough for you. It really depends on the workload, right?
Right.
I think we can say automate first as a principle. Period. Automate everything as a first principle. But I think cloud, we need to say we need to be smart. I don't think everything should be cloud first as a principle. I
Right.
think we need to be cloud smart, but I think we can be automate first.
Yeah.
That's sort of my take. Yeah.
Because offloading to a cloud, when you talk about cloud outages, it's not like having multiple ISPs and you can kind of fill over if one goes down. What are you going to do? Replicate your data in two different service providers in the cloud? You know what I mean? So I can see it from that sense. You can't just be twiddling your fingers saying, "Hey, we're down. There's nothing we can do, and we gotta wait." The business is losing money. So, yeah, in that aspect, that is a hard sell for organizations that really need those 5 nines, 4 nines, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think there's an opportunity though. Like if you were a new startup or like an upstart, or you wanted to get business and you had an idea and you want to get to market. What are you going to go get? A CCNP and a CCIE and a cloud guy and a compute guy and a storage person and a woman for project management and a woman for day-to-day operations and a man for this. And now suddenly you need 30 or 40 people just to get your business digitized.
Right.
Well, the cloud, they're like, right, we're here for you. Bring us your needs. We'll host it. We'll take care of it. You can focus on making money and your idea, right? Not every company wants to be in the business of, like I used to work for an insurance company, and one of the first things they sent to the cloud was email. Because the CIO that came in as a new CIO said, I don't want to be in the email business.
I know.
I don't want to be in that business.
Right.
I want to be in the insurance business.
Yeah.
or whatever it is that you do as a core competency to make money and to make your customers happy. Do you still want to be lugging an Exchange server around?
That's one of the best things you could have ever put in the cloud, to be honest with you, is an Exchange server. I don't miss those days at all.
No. And I read about I hate to pick on them, but they did just have that vulnerability, and I kind of shake my head saying, you deserve it. if you're still running on-prem Exchange in 2021, you deserve that. Okay.
I don't think they
I'm
deserve
sorry.
It,
Don't hate on me. I'm sorry. I'm having a little fun with DWAN right now.
We might have some engineers that have been through that outage, and they don't feel like they deserve that.
What I mean? They certainly don't feel like they deserve it. That's right. That's right. But I bet you they had a cloud budget Monday morning.
For sure. All right. I'm going to get to some questions. Thank you, John, for this amazing interview. This conversation in coding, in my opinion, turned out excellent. The things that you share, the topics that we touched on, it's. I hope everybody was able to take something away from this and have a new outlook on automation and how they could get started. And not just get started, but expand on maybe the projects that they already started and see some of the capabilities. Because I think with Merlin, not only did you just focus on automation, but you took it to the next level with some things we didn't even show, but like with the 3D automation and even more things that you built into it. You've had a lot of fun with this project.
It's, I don't have any children of my own, and I want to leave some kind of legacy behind. And I'm thinking, if I could reach 100 stars on GitHub, I've done something right, and I've done something for the community,
Yeah.
But I echo what you're saying. I don't think people should wait. If you want to differentiate yourself, the DevNet Associate exam, the DevNet sandboxes, you can become a pro in, a few hours a night, 15, 20 minutes a night of studying. I don't want to be like the abs guy, 6 minutes a day, you can become ripped. but like, in half an hour, 45 minutes of dedicated studying on Python, Git, Linux, you name it, APIs, because that's the future.
Right.
Have you ever stopped and wondered, how do we have, like, I don't know, we didn't have Amazon, Netflix, Disney, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it. What are all of these things built on? They're built on REST APIs. Is really the guts of these modern hyper-connected solutions.
For sure.
And now it's come to infrastructure. Now it's come to our world. And I think we can do our businesses a better service than, yep, I logged into 10 routers and typed in VLAN 10, name blue. That was a nice productive day. Just write a 15-minute, take you 15 minutes to do that in Python. And you could sell that to your management when you have your personal one-on-one reviews and say, no, no, look, we're automating things now,
Yeah.
right? Look at what I've learned how to do.
You don't even have to. You don't even have to write it these days. Go to DevNet Code Exchange, download some code because somebody's probably already done it.
Somebody's done it. Somebody's done it. And all of a sudden, yeah, what was the thing in comedy, right? Everybody steals, right? Or
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
or a good comedian comes up with their own, but a great comedian steals from other people.
Hey,
Hey,
the
and go to my GitHub repository. Automate your network on GitHub. There's like 40 repos on there. I've done everything from Ansible. Dwan and I were talking about Python and Pokemon.
yeah,
I mean, you can start with the Pokemon API and write yourself a little fun Pokemon API. If
hey,
you've never used Postman, when you wake up Sunday morning, tomorrow, wake up, download and install Postman, go to the Pokemon API or the International Space Station API. There's about a dozen or 20, 100 really fun deck of cards. I've
deck
heard is a
cards.
fun
Yep.
API. There's lots of great stuff out there for free. You know, stop playing Pokemon out on the streets chasing them down and maybe write some Python to do it.
Hey, I want to say this though. Now, I want to say this: the difference between comedy and telling jokes and stealing jokes is that in software development is not stealing code; it's actually collaboration.
That's right. That's right. I'm refactoring. But to the point about coding, and if people want to get started, you saw a lot of different things tonight. You saw some HTML, you saw some CSS, some cascading style sheets, you saw Python, Jinja 2,
JSON.
Docker, Kubernetes. Clone my repository and start with the HTML. Start with making my Python better, right? I
Documentation.
really encourage you and invite you to get involved. I'm happy to send you messages privately through Discord or WebEx or something to help you or to listen to your ideas. You might have saw something tonight that I haven't seen. That's a great part about sharing and collaborating is different perspectives on how to solve the same problems and solutions, right?
Right. Hey, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Shout out to the moderators, Sam, Tiffany. I seen some more. Gabe. Let's see who else is in here.
Hey,
Kev.
thanks, moderators. I didn't know we had moderators and everything. Thank you.
Yes. Reese. Kev. Um, Here's a question from Sam. His question is, are you a network engineer first or a developer second? And a developer second or vice versa?
Wow, that's tough.
Backstory. Backstory.
Let me say, before I passed my DevNet Associate, I was a network engineer.
Mm,
Now that I've passed it, I can confidently call myself a solutions developer. I think that's how I would differentiate it. But my so I don't know, they mix together for me so much, it's hard to distinguish the two. Um, I've always been fascinated with with like what I'm doing tonight with Dwan, with connecting with people through computers. I grew up in the BBS era. That predates probably some of a lot of our viewers tonight. But you used to use phone wires and dial up your buddy's phone number with your computer and interact with the computers through the phone wires. That was my first. I was like 10 years old when I started at BBS. And when someone typed in hello with a question mark on my screen, that was like the man on the moon moment for me. I was in my head. I wanted to work with computers. Nothing else mattered. There's always been a computer in my home since about 1986. I you know I've been I just love technology because it's freedom. To me, technology is freedom. I used to work 12-hour shifts in an aluminum factory, slugging heavy gauge metal. Some days I could barely take my boots off. Now I get to work with a keyboard and a mouse. This is the heaviest thing I have to lift all day. Right? So technology was freedom for me, and automation is even more freedom for me. So thank you, Sam. That's a great question. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It has been for a while, and it's even going to be more and more in demand as services move to the cloud, and people want. It's not just big enterprises that have impressive networks. It's going to filter down into the small and medium-sized business market. Now, here's another way to look at it. You could use Google Earth and Google Maps as a search engine for jobs. And I mean that. If you want to live in Cincinnati, if you want to live in Vancouver, if you want to live in Rome, look at their city from a Google Earth from a certain distance. And every industry you see on there, every public utility, every hospital, every insurance company, everything on that map needs IT people. And to the point, it needs networking people. Every one of those industries. So you can just, I think with the right mix of education, certification, and experience, the world is yours. If you want to go work for a FANG company in Silicon Valley, no problem, right? If you want to work in your hometown and don't want to move too far away because that's your personal choice, there's likely networking careers in your relatively close geography to where you live. There's so it's not directly network engineers. Canada has a 30,000 open IT security jobs right now.
Yeah.
Canada has a 30,000 IT security professional deficit. I'm sure the network engineer numbers are similar. It's a deficit in the market right now for people with our skill sets. I love it. DWAN, what are your thoughts?
I love network engineering. I mean, honestly, I miss it like crazy. The thing I think about though is that, are we in a phase of what the phone guys went through? Like, are we in this phase? And what I mean by that is that everybody, or not everybody, but the people that focus on traditional network engineering do not adapt to the SDN, the network programmability, the cloud integrations, and understanding all of this that you may not see in your organization now. Like, you could honestly be left behind if you don't adapt. That's where I kind of think we are right now. Like, and I don't think it'd be one of those situations like, oh, okay, maybe I need to start learning these skills. I think people will just wake up one day and the switch has flipped, and the traditional route switch will no longer be in demand. That's just, I think it's going to happen fast.
I think you're right. I am optimistic about the field, but when I think of a network engineer now, I think of more than someone who can make BGP neighbors or OSPF neighbors.
Yep.
Right. I think they can do those things, but now they can do them at scale. They can do them repeatable and through programmatic solutions.
Yep.
The API is unavoidable, right? It is coming. It is now on the 9300s in your access closets.
Man.
APIs. It's right down there now.
Microservices are on Cisco devices.
Yeah. Containerized, Thousand Eyes, right? Yeah. In the compute of the closet. Yeah. It's rapidly changing. So you have to be able to keep up. But I don't know what's holding people back, DWAN. Do you know? Do you know why I've met some engineers that it's gone beyond just that they're slow to adopt it. They've actually sort of dug their heels in and said, look, I'm a network engineer. I don't want to learn how to code. I have no interest in learning how to code. I feel very concerned about those people.
There's two reasons. The first reason, I'm from like a small town. And so if you're in a small town, you can be in an island because this is all you know. You don't see anything outside of you, so you don't see the bigger picture of what the world has to offer. I think that's one reason. The second reason is I think you have senior level engineers that run a network they've been there 20 something years or longer.
Right.
This is their baby. They make all the decisions. And so they feel they don't need these skills. Okay, automation to me is EEM. You know what I mean? Things like that. Like they've been doing this forever. They've seen technologies come and go, and they may feel like this is a phase. You know, because this is they're secure in where they are. But just like those phone guys that were secure in where they are.
Right. So when I started in the field, they still call them this. We used to call those the graybeards. The old graybeards they're not getting with it, man. Or they'd say, well, you know, why haven't we done this? Talk to the graybeards, man. I'm just a junior. Nobody listens to me. You got to go talk to the guy who's been here 25 years. And now here I am 20 years later. Look at all this gray in my beard. And people call me the graybeard. Now, hopefully I don't work that way of, you know, being rigid and stuck in my ways or anything. But you're right about that there is a little bit of arrogance, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Well, they're not going to, you know, if they get rid of me, they'll never be able to run this network without me. Well, I don't know. For how long? I don't know about that, right?
Business is going to keep going. I mean, I think if you ever feel like this place needs me, then it's probably too late for you. Because every time I've ever felt that way or seen somebody feel that way, it's sad. Like it's a painful, like, man, I can't believe this is happening to me feeling. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's
yeah. It's I'm still excited and optimistic though, and I'm really excited about what I think is really neat. We have a pretty good steady intake from Carleton University and Ottawa University and Algonquin College. You know, co-op students and juniors coming in of that nature, right out of school. And holy cow, they're smart. Holy cow, they know Python and the networking, and they have Network Academy as part of their university and stuff now. An actual Network Academy. It's not like, you know, they had to go find Packet Tracer and learn it on their own. They're learning it formally in the school, and they're learning it, like you said, it's part of their toolkit now.
Yep.
Right from the ground up. I had to learn. So here's another thing. Let me tell you my story about my first network automation, my first Ansible playbook. And so I was using Notepad to write my YAML playbooks, and I was using TFTP to send them over to a CentOS box and run them one at a time. Okay, now if there's a problem with it, I would like rename it, you know, _ problem, TFTP it back to my dev box, update the Notepad, send it back, try it again. It was like the Price is Right game, you know, where they change the prices and he pulls the switch and it's like 3 things are right. And he changes them around again and he pulls the lever. There's like 4 things are right or 2 things are right. That was like my first 6 weeks with Ansible. Man. And I just was like, this is not the future. There's no way people are talking about this is network automation.
Right.
So, you know, VS Code, Git, GitHub, Azure DevOps, TFS, whatever the tools are, you have to, if you're going to adopt this, you have to work with the tools appropriately, right?
Yeah.
There are a certain suite of tools and a certain methodology, agile instead of waterfall. Almost everything I've ever done in networking up until maybe 3 years ago was like this. The architect drafts it up at a high level. Some designer turns it into code. That turns into an RFC or a request for change ticket. That's an attachment per device. And eventually some poor operator has to log in each device and type in the code, right? Like this, just flowing down. Not anymore. Now it's like quick little code, continuous releasing of little bits of code, continuously, constantly growing and fast and fast and fast. And it's not about 35 pages of documentation anymore. I got a nice little README file. Everything you need to know is in there. It's up in the GitHub repo. Let's get on with the business of making money. Or in my case, it's the public sector. I'm not necessarily making a lot of money, you know, but keeping the government running, right?
Yeah. I think I need to do some shout outs real quick. And I'm going to come back to that.
Hear them. Yeah.
Hey, Jermaine, thanks for the super chat, man. It's good to see you, Jermaine. I appreciate you, family. If you got a question, please leave them in the chat. I definitely appreciate you. Swish 23 Brian. I think I know who that is. I can't remember. I know who that is. I know who that is. I think it's my boy Mark. I think it is. Thank you for the super chat, family. Every day. Okay. He has a question. The question is, where do you think the industry is headed within the cloud environment industry?
I think it's more and more workloads. I think it's great place for, like we talked about, hybrid cloud and burstable infrastructure. I think it's great for companies that don't want the overhead of an on-prem data center. Everything from power and cooling takes a lot, right? Square footage in some building somewhere, racks and cages and wiring. And I think a lot of industries have moved along from that. And the other thing is I love about the cloud is you can take great big problems and break them down into small little solutions and little components of different, right? Like I can do Kubernetes in Azure or AWS. I can do, my CI/CD pipelines are all tied in with the cloud now. I actually have those Docker containers that you saw earlier. Well, when I do a pull request into GitHub, it actually triggers a cloud side container build, if you can believe it.
Right.
So I don't even have to build those containers of mine. I've got little cloud robots that detect, oh, John's merged in some new code. I'm going to rebuild his containers. So I hope that's what you mean. But I'm really excited about the technologies available in the cloud.
Okay, this is a perfect segue. I'm going to say something and I want your opinion on it. For those of you that are looking to get into automation and wanting to learn Python and want to get your skills up fast, my suggestion to you is to find a position or find a project that you can get a part of a pipeline and you can start submitting code that's being peer reviewed, or you're peer reviewing someone else's code. Like, that is one of the fastest ways to get your software development skills up to par. Like, if you can get in a part of a iteration or in a sprint, a scrum, to where you have to figure out code samples to submit every week or 2 weeks, and it's being peer reviewed, your skills will grow exponential. What are your thoughts, John?
I love it. I think you're totally right. And really try to take an automate first approach. Now, it's not going to be without some pain and some learning and some discovery, but if you can work it out with your management. Now, I'm not talking about a high pressure must fix thing, but if there's some low hanging fruit, if there's some nice to have code, if there's, like DWAN said, an ongoing project that's already going on with developers you can tap into, I think you have to just start writing that code.
Yeah.
You've got to start writing your own code. And look at Stack Overflow. Look at the Code Exchange. Look at Google examples. There's no shame in it. There's no harm in it. Now, I wouldn't copy paste something from Stack Overflow directly into a production pipeline, mind you.
Never.
Right? You got to be careful and use a little common sense. But I think that so here's a good example, and this could be any technology you want. We want to convert our 802.1x from the legacy mode into what they call C3PL, which is this new ISBN 2.0 policy-driven 802.1x. And I was like, bring it on, let's do it. What are the steps? So we wrote some pseudocode. Well, we'd like to capture the config first. We'd like to remove the old config. We'd like to convert it to the new mode. We'd like to recapture the config. And then we'd like a differential. I said, well, you just wrote 90% of the code, right? Like, having a nice laid out plan.
Right.
I said, let's actually take those comments and make them comments in the code. And then we'll go into the gaps between each of those steps and write the Python. Right. And this was with a junior, he was very good with Ansible, but he was excited and interested in learning pieats. So it's like, okay, pieats dot learn bracket config bracket. Okay, I now have the config in JSON. All right, like, we've just solved the first big ask of capture the config before we do anything else.
Right.
Done, no problem. So then he's like, wow, okay, so let's do the next steps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we use a Jinja 2 template and we use dot configure, which in pieats goes to the config T mode and serially puts in the commands you want. Boom, we've removed the old code. Okay, do the exact same thing, but add new code and then config, right? Capture the new config, run it through the differential. All done. All done at scale. Now, to do that manually, Duan, like just to log into that many devices is going to take 6 hours. Just
Yeah.
logging in, right? So, and then the human error, the touch points. Python, I'm not saying it's perfect, but you've got the power of VS Code. You've got the power of linters. You've got the power of deploying to a test environment. You're not relying on the pressure of a human being to be on the right device, in the right
Right.
context, in the right building, with the right IPs, with the right code, without accidentally hitting the wrong button. You know how much less pressure there is on our organization now that we're just like, yeah, run the Python, man. Run the Python, girl. You're good. You're good.
You know the most annoying thing about let's say copying and pasting from Notepad, bytecode
Oh,
that you can't see. Have you ever done
yes.
that? Like you copy the whole config into the CLI, and there's some character that does not show up in Notepad, and you can't figure it out. Like, why is it not copying in? Like, and then you
I
do that
walked
during the
in.
change. Oh my god!
I walked in during a big P1 once, and I was like, I was late to the party. They called. I'm like sometimes the last resort,
Right.
right? Okay, we better just call John, right? They finally call me, and I go, "Well, why didn't you call me an hour ago?" Right? Anyway, I walk on site, and the guy's got Word open. I'm like, "Are you copying the code in from Word?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, that
Good luck
might
with that.
be, that might be part of the problem. Let's bring it into Notepad."
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was like some hidden ASCII character or something, like some weird thing. Sometimes, anyway, I've seen some real crazy things in the industry. Okay, I've had a lot of fun. I've done a lot of really good things, and it's changed my life, Dwan. Like, I was able to go to all these different Cisco lives across America, visit big American cities. I've been all across Canada in my private sector time, from coast to coast. Um, you know, I've really this career has afforded me a lot of opportunities. A really like it really has changed the whole trajectory of my life. Going back to school and learning how to program, for me was what changed my, the trajectory that I was on. So I really want to encourage people to really think strongly about risk and reward and how much, if you don't have to be a genius, right? And don't listen to the gatekeepers out there talking about, oh, you're not a real engineer if you didn't go to forget all that noise, okay? You can make a very good career and make a lot of money and work in good conditions with like an A plus N plus or with an Azure entry level cert. They're like I mean it. I want you to really believe in yourselves that you can make something in this field.
Yes. That's some good advice and some great encouragement. Shout out to Kev Tech IT support. Thank you. You said much love and respect for helping people. Keep doing these interviews. Um, Somebody asked a question a while ago. I wanted to ask you this. Like, you do a lot of great things. In the last 3 years, you wrote a book, wrote a full-on automation project. You've done migrations. You've done a tremendous amount of things, right? Do you ever suffer from burnout?
Um, yeah, yes, I have. I have burned out in the past, and I there's a little bit of magic to how I release my content and having a bunch of it created and then getting it out there. So there's a little bit of magic there. I'm not working quite as hard as people think I'm working, but to avoid burnout, part of it is that I've found a new enjoyment and a new invigoration for my work itself. I would be burned out if I was doing waterfall CLI device by device, if I didn't have the adoption of my automation ideas, my management's behind me. I'm very fortunate that I'm able to get affect change, let's say, and push forward with new ideas and new ways of doing things.
Yeah.
So that helps me avoid burnout. I also, if I work some on call or overtime or have to come in on the weekends, I tend to take that in time off.
Mhm.
I tend not to cash in on overtime or whatever. I tend to just work out and say, I'm going to take Friday afternoon or next Thursday or right. I
Right.
try to work that out where I'm not overworking myself. But a big part of it is that I it doesn't it doesn't feel like work to me,
Yeah.
and there's nothing compelling me to keep up with the open source project, right? If I needed some time off, if I don't do it every single night, but I I used to be a big World of Warcraft player.
Mm.
And I was actually burning out on the game. That's what actually was burning out on
And
was the grind and logging in and yeah, like keeping up with. I need that sword. If I don't get that new sword, I don't know what's going to happen to me. So I had to make a clean break from WoW and focus on my development and my coding and stuff. It's
right.
a funny story. I know it sounds funny, but I struggle with my gaming a little bit, to be honest with you.
Man, I think a big part of it as well when it comes to burnout is time management and support. Like those two pieces. One of the things you mentioned is like your management is behind you. If you come in, on your off day or you have to work overtime, you get that time back. But sometimes I know I've been in environments where you can't get that time back. The expectation is 8 hours plus, weekends plus whenever we need you. And so you may be doing that. And I know at one point, not only was I doing that, but I also had another job where I was working 8 hours a day. So I was killing myself while studying for certifications, working over 80 hours a week, working, trying to get my CCNA to improve my life because I was broke and my family, like it was, man, it was one of the most painful times in my life. So yes, I burnt out, but I had so many responsibilities and so much depending on me that I couldn't even like face my burnout. But I know people from that have had heart attacks, that have
I
broke
know.
down. Like you have to take care of yourself.
You do. You really do. And you mentioned support. I would really be, not doing the right thing if I didn't mention the support I have of my wife
Yep.
and my family at home. She's 100% behind me. She's been with me my whole life, my whole career.
Awesome.
And we were broke. We were really poor. We struggled a lot. We moved to Toronto to pursue my dreams, and it was really hard a couple years there in Toronto. So we moved back to my hometown of Kingston, where I worked from the bottom. I took a massive pay cut um, because my family wasn't happy in the big city in Toronto, and I'm still kind of a junior, so
Right.
I wasn't commanding the money to match the cost of living there.
Mm.
I had student debt and I had credit cards, and you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it was a tough life for a while.
Right.
So I moved back to Kingston, but I took a help desk job to get out of the city and to start over again
Wow.
and work my way back up.
Right.
So you got to really be careful about burnout and about your family life. Same as the certifications. I don't book anything unless I'm sure that we can afford it,
Hmm.
afford failing it, I should say.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate enough that, and here's a tip about certs. I posted this. Talk to your management, engage with your manager or HR, and express one that you're interested in this and that you're investing in yourself. But find out if they'll reimburse you at least for your exam.
Right.
And it's nothing to most companies. $300 is nothing, but it shows that initiative, and it also makes sure you're not out of pocket
Yeah.
if you pass and can get the money back. But that's not always guaranteed. The other thing is, I'm very open about it's hard. These certifications are the real deal, man.
Man.
Especially associate.
Yeah.
People might think that they get harder as they go up. I don't know. I like a laser focus. Like when I write the T-shoot or the route exam,
Yeah.
it's like one topic that's super deep. But people coming in with associate level, man, those exams are mile wide. DevNet covers everything from Unix commands to pipelines to containers. Do you know what I mean? And you kind of mentioned this about like the modern network engineer. We have like if we had a toolkit around our belt, it would be loaded with all these new gadgets and we'd look like Batman, right?
Yeah. But to your point, like, and this is something I always try to talk to network engineers that I mentor. You have to understand networking to the point everything that comes across the pipe in your network. Because developers are just going to build applications. They don't care where the application touches the back end. They don't really care about that. So now a good developer is going to understand how the application works, but you as a network engineer need to understand the services that are coming across and how they're connecting. And, if they're going across the internet, if they're not, if they're going east-west, you have to know and understand that. And so my thing when it comes to like DevNet certifications, if you really dive into all of that, that's half the battle. Just understanding the networking part and understanding the services, because what I found, especially in my last role, what helped me was just talking to developers about their services, understanding how these back applications function, understanding how these APIs are communicating, all of that. And then, okay, they may have a tool on how they test their application to see if ports are open or whatever. You know what I mean? So you can actually build that out to say, okay, here's a tool for you to be able to test if there's an ACL open or if there's a port open. So you ain't got to contact me. Here's a website. Go there, hit a source, destination, and port, and then it'll tell you if it's open. There's actually a tool you can actually build in your network for that. We built it in my last organization.
That's amazing. The number one thing that like I mean I can't think of something that'll make you understand your application stack and its relationship to networks more than disaster recovery. Right? When there's a disaster, when you actually have like an outage, and it's not, I'm not talking about a backhoe cut some fiber. I'm talking about a room full of people scratching their heads because some service is not serving, right? Or right, some key piece of infrastructure isn't talking to some other key piece of infrastructure. And what links those two things is the network. It's us.
Yeah.
And you have no idea what you could be pulled into. Security incidents, they're going to want to look at those PCAPs and those Wiresharks and your network expertise as to whether or not, right, the network is involved in some of these security issues.
Yep.
Application stacks, well, I mean, you see it all the time on Twitter. Spend 10 minutes on Twitter and tell me that you don't see a DNS joke, right?
Yeah, I think it was one already in the chat.
There's probably one right now about how DNS was the root cause. So DWAN's right. It's much more. There's a lot to it. But you can really become like a really valued member of the team. I think if you have a humble approach and you collaborate well and have those soft skills, you can really become important to private, public, small, large, medium, any organization, right? There's the network person, right? In quotes, right? We need the network person. There's a reason why there's that stereotype, because all roads lead to the network. Everything is connected from printers to toasters. Do you know that I have a stove on my network at the House of Commons? Right? A smart stove. Right. I needed to get on the network. So that's like really exciting times to be in this field, right?
That's good stuff. Hey, man, we've been going for about 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
This has been an excellent conversation that I've truly enjoyed. I mean, honestly, this is probably one of my favorite, just because of the depth of knowledge that you shared, the topics that we discussed, the relatability of the topics we discussed. Like, I really enjoyed this, man. Thank you.
Oh, me too. I really like the rapport and getting to know you and really, getting to know DWAN Lightfoot and making a nice contact and friend and connection in the community. This has been this has been a dream come true. I totally lost track of time. I didn't mean to keep you all night. Thank you for all this platform time and everybody out there who tuned in from all over the world. I'm really humbled by the support and the feedback. Let's make this a positive community. Let's try to keep this, healthy for everybody. We have enough problems and enough challenges every day. Let's look out for each other, okay?
Yes, yes. All of John's contact information is in the description of this video. Y'all make sure that y'all to go check him out on Twitter, subscribe to his YouTube channel, support him. His book is in the details as well. All of that. Make sure y'all give him a ton of support. And if you have some code to add to Merlin, do a pull request. Contribute to his project. I want to, but we're going to have some one-on-one so we can talk about how I can add some value and see what's needed. But we'll get that done. All right. Hey, John, you want to take us out tonight?
Hey, thanks so much and believe in yourselves. You can make magic happen, right? It's a wonderful time to be alive. Duan's here to help you. I'm here to help you. Go after those certifications, go after your dreams, and stay safe and be kind to one another out there. Thanks so much for watching tonight.
Yep. Peace.
All right, peace out.